Hey everyone, this is Sunflower, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different, but something I've been meaning to do for ages, which is reorganize my TBR carts. I think the fact that I have multiple shows that it is definitely time for me to sort through and get these organized. Now, my goal here is twofold. One, I want to organize this, have some sort of system in place, because right now the books are just kind of put on here. So I want to make it easier to search, to find if I'm feeling in a particular mood. What system I'm going to be using, I think I'll figure that out as I go. But I do want it neater than just books. Goal number 2 is also to go through and see if there are any books I'm no longer interested in. And with all of that out of the way, let's get started. On the very, very top, I have books and series that I'm technically somewhere in the middle of. I'm currently making my way through the Trials of Apollo series. I'm on the 3rd book now, so I am actively reading this box set. I'm just waiting to finish book 3 before I move on to book 4, before I move on to book 5. Pretty self-explanatory. To stay on the Percy Jackson train, I also just got The Wrath of the Triple-Headed Goddess. I read the first book in the series. I did really enjoy it, but it felt a little bit like a return to the middle school format, whereas Trials of Apollo, Heroes of Olympus was very YA. It's still very fun and very enjoyable Percy Jackson, but because it's targeting a middle school demographic, it's a little hard for me to really get into it in the same way I did with the more YA-centered things. But I am still excited to give this a go. A book I've been stopping and starting for different reasons. You Will Get Through This Night by Dan Howell. For anyone who happens to be unfamiliar with Dan Howell, half of Dan and Phil. And this mental health guide is very much like a straightforward, very no-nonsense, how to handle different points of mental health struggles, whether you're in the midst of a crisis or an episode, or whether you're trying to manage things to make sure that you stay on the up and up. This has been really, really helpful for me. Even if you're not a big YouTuber fan, I've recommended this to people in my life, family members, people who have no idea what YouTube is, let alone Dan and Phil. So it's a really good book. This is actually my 3rd read through of the book. So I have read it before. I'll read it again. Highly recommend. Speaking of Dan and Phil, I do not read books like this at all. These like domestic thriller mystery type of situations. But on Dan and Phil's podcast, Hard Launch, they mentioned that they read it while on vacation. So I decided, you know what? I found it for $6 at Marshall's, so I might as well. And this is the Series of Unfortunate Events prequel series, All the Wrong Questions. Very similar to the current main Percy Jackson series. This is more middle school, grade book, chapter book type thing compared to the, I would say, more YA stylings of the original A Series of Unfortunate Events. It definitely still has that classic Lemony Snicket charm and fun and wit, but because it is aimed at a grade school audience, it's a little too late for me to get into, but it's still fun. I did start it and then stop it. I do want to give it one more shot, though, before I completely decide to DNF it. God is Round, a philosophical rumination on soccer. There's going to be a lot of soccer books here. I'm going to call it soccer, so make your peace with that now. While I'm taking the books off the shelf, I'm also going to start organizing them into piles here. The Art of War. Actually a pretty interesting read if you're interested in the very bare bones fundamentals of actual literal warfare. But it's one of those books that's constantly misunderstood by tech bros, so I get why it has the rep it has. I bought a bunch of these cool, queer, inclusive retellings of classic stories. I'm really excited about this one because I love The Great Gatsby. I know the characters are kind of insufferable, that's kind of the point. Separate tangent. But I am interested to see how this remix tackles the whole concept of the failure of the American dream. I love Aurora. I'm not the best at keeping up with webcomics, and I've been meaning to reread the series, so I'm super happy it's slowly but surely coming out in physical media, so I can actually sit down and read it and enjoy it. Speaking of webcomics, I also have Countdown to Countdown, another webcomic I've been following. This one a little more on and off because it's much more of an in-depth world-building, mysterious intrigue type of story, so it really requires intense focus, which is hard for me to do when I'm reading digitally. More middle grade books, these were actually gifts from a family member of mine. I know I read a lot of Gary Paulson as a kid, and I absolutely adored Magic Treehouse. If you've ever listened to a fictional podcast and even thought about making your own, I cannot recommend How to Make an Audio Drama by Tal Minear enough. Tal is absolutely incredible and talented They've made and worked and collaborated on so many fiction podcasts. So I'm so excited to own this, to really properly sit down and read through this, and I cannot recommend it enough. I don't read a lot of light novels, but I love My Hero Academia, so I do want to give this one a shot. I don't think I'm going to buy the rest of the series, though. I definitely have a bunch of Tim Gunn books scattered throughout my TBR carts, so I definitely want to consolidate them, get them all together. The Artificial Silk Girl. I've read it before. I have to read it again. It's set in the late 20s, early 30s. It's very much about classism, class struggles, poverty. It is so interesting and so enticing. I have to read this again. More soccer books, Iron Widow, The Wicked and the Divine. Oh my gosh, I have to finish this. I have read every volume except the final one because I do not want it to end. It's so good, but I need to know how it ends. And this might be a summer project for me, rereading all of The Wicked and the Divine, and then finally tackling the last one. Lure Olympus. Everyone and their mother has an opinion on this book, and I have seen the thumbnails floating around on YouTube. But I want to read it for myself. I want to form my own opinion. I love Greek mythology. I especially love Hades and Persephone and all the different ways you can retell that story. So again, I know people have strong opinions about this, but I want to form my own. Heartstopper, Matt Fraction's Hawkeye, I want to reread. I think what I'm going to do is keep all the graphic novels and comics and manga together, partly because I do think reading graphic novels and reading pure written word is two different moods for me, and partly just because logistically, my graphic novels and my omnibuses and all the collected volumes are a little too tall to go anywhere except for the top shelf here. And manga, I think I can at least put on some of the lower shelves. Dracula Daily. As of recording, this has just started up again. I think we're like 5 or 8 entries in, I'm not sure. But in the same way I struggle to read webcomics online, I also struggle to read Dracula Daily or any kind of written text on a computer screen, on a phone, on a tablet even. So I bought the hardcover version. I still need to sit down and read this. This I think I'm going to save till the fall though, because even though Dracula Daily is going on right now and the entries take place in the spring and the summer and the fall, Dracula just feels like an autumnal read, you know? This is another thing about the TBR carts being so overstuffed, is that sometimes you really gotta reverse Tetris getting the books out of here. Everything is tuberculosis. I know this is gonna be a hard read, but everything nonfiction of John Green I've really enjoyed. So I want to give this a shot. I think I just have to be in the right headspace for it. Hyperion. I read the Hyperion Canto so long ago and absolutely loved it. My old copy disintegrated from how often I reread it, so I bought this. But they did also just come out with like a special edition. I've been trying to track it down, so if I do manage to get the sturdy hardcover edition of this, this will definitely be going on to a new home. I love a good fancy edition. This is weird because it's technically a hardcover, but the cover is kind of rubbery and definitely not sturdy like a typical hardcover, but it just looks so pretty. The quote on the back is even embossed into this material. So even though it's not as sturdy as I normally would like, I do think it's the right choice for what they were doing with this particular edition of The Picture of Dorian Gray. A book about the history of Yuri, very important. More Tim Gunn, even more Tim Gunn. This is about sports writing, so it actually covers quite a few different sports. Basketball, baseball, hockey. It's more about the craft of sports journalism, so I'm very excited to crack into this one. Never Let Me Go. I have heard such good things about this from so many people, especially people in the booktube sphere, but more importantly, my partner recommended this to me. So I should actually definitely prioritize this because I want to be able to discuss it with my partner. Here's a little fun tip. If you're trying to learn or practice another language, getting children's books that you love and are familiar with in that language help out a ton. I love Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, so I'm very happy to have a Spanish edition copy. I also have the Nico D'Angelo series. I'm normally not a big sprayed edges person, but I pre-ordered this on Barnes & Noble, and the sprayed edges version was the same exact price as the non-sprayed edges version, so I figured why not. I definitely want to finish Trials of Apollo before I get to the Nico D'Angelo series. I've been told that is the correct reading order, If I am wrong, please let me know down in the comments. A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor, the second book in the Hank Green duology. I definitely want to reread An Absolutely Remarkable Thing before I read this, just to refresh my memory. I remember absolutely loving the first one, but also feeling so harrowed by this realistic and terrifying look at what it's like to be instantly, virally famous and thrust into the spotlight, especially in the, at the time, modern day social media landscape. Even between the publishing of the first and second book, social media has changed so much. While I have this blank one here, I definitely want this to be comics, graphic novels, and manga. All of the tall comics and graphic novels are going to go on the top shelf, just out of practicality. Then rotate you around. And what I'm actually going to do is, I think, just to make things easier for myself, is take all of the manga and graphic novels that I have here and shift it over onto this TBR cart so they're all consolidated. If you see me rushing a little bit, that is because my camera battery is about to run out and I don't have a backup system yet. So I'm just going to see how well we can do with what we have. There might be a point where this cuts out, but I do want to show you as much of the process as possible. Right now, this is just me moving my manga from one shelf over to another. And I already have this organized for the most part, so I can just take that on. And then I actually have more space left on this bottom shelf, so I'm going to keep an eye out for little stopgap things that I can put in here. Paradise Lost. Started it, haven't gotten back into it yet, so I probably have to restart it. I did enjoy what I read, but it's very, very dense. It requires a lot of attention. Definitely an at-home or a vacation read. This is actually a graphic novel, so this can go over here. I'm going to start putting my YA books up here. The YA books that I have take up the most amount of space because I enjoy YA. It's fun. It's usually the easiest to read on the train. I like to read when I'm on my commute. So YA books tend to be pretty easy for that. I've also decided to put my light novels with my graphic novels. I only have 3 or 4, so it's not that big of a deal. And I think it fits thematically, if nothing else. So I have My Hero Academia, Kamikaze Girls, Elle Changed the World are all up here too. House of Leaves. This is definitely a book you can't read on the train. I'm halfway through now. This is another book I think I'm going to have to restart from the beginning. This is an interesting read and I have thoughts, but I also want to finish it and form my own opinion. This I'm definitely going to have to set aside some time for. Masters of Modern Soccer by Grant Wall, a great soccer journalist who unfortunately passed away. I did read this book when it came out. I don't have a strong memory of it. And I did put it back on my TBR cart after his passing. I want to see what's changed since his last analysis. It was just a really sad time. It was in the middle of the World Cup. A lot of people made very touching tributes to him. So I'm very excited to read this book. It's going to be an emotional, sentimental read. Aside from that, he was also just a very well-known, very well-respected soccer journalist. It feels like it's honoring his memory in a way. This will fit here. German language book that's going to go with the other German and Spanish language books. I'm putting the Nico and D'Angelo books closer to the top because I do want to get to them pretty much immediately after I finish Trials of Apollo. I'm going to speedrun putting all of these books back on the cart. I will be back with you shortly. And then my camera completely filled up on memories. So here's a quick overview of what I ended up doing with my TBR cart. On the very top shelf, I have all of my comics and graphic novels, and also a handful of light novels. On the middle shelf, I have all of my manga, and on the bottom shelf, I have all my children's books, middle grade books, chapter books, including some in a couple of different languages that I really want to study and practice. On the top shelf of my second TBR cart, I have all my YA books. On the middle shelf, I have my nonfiction, a variety of history, sports history, and journalism, a little bit of everything. I like keeping my horizons broad, so definitely excited to pick and choose a lot of these. And on the bottom shelf are the classics. things that have been popular throughout the test of time. There are still a couple of books scattered here and there in the quote-unquote wrong section. That's mostly for physical limitations. Dracula Daily is, I think, meant to be a coffee table book, which is why it's so tall. And then my very, very current I'm in the middle of these series reads are just stacked on top. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!